real quick. Everybody thinks they're good at talking. Very few people, including myself apparently, decide to test that theory in public. Today's guest has made a career out. Scott Edwards, stand-up comic, speaker, trainer, and the mind behind Verbal Ninja Productions, which means he understands communication when it goes right and when it crashes hard. This is an origin episode that I've never done before. This one we're going to do a little bit more unique. So we're going to dig into the chaos, where it started, where it falls apart for most people, and how it's turned into something real. Scott, welcome to the show, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to be on here. Dads with Nerdy Ambitions. It's great. And I'm Scott Edwards. Thank you. Thank you. Down and back. It's not that big a deal. So excited to be here, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on your amazing, eclectic podcast. Man, you do so much great stuff.
Thank you. Wow. Usually it's the other way around is making the guests feel special over here. I'm not used to being all like buttered up over here.
Well, the accolades are going to keep coming because you've been doing this for 6 years. You're a professional, and podcasting is a tough thing to stay consistent with. I always tell everybody it's important to be consistent and persistent, and that's what makes a podcast successful like yours.
I love that. Thank you so much, sir.
In fact, everybody is quite excited.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, welcome to the show, sir. In these episodes, when I have people come on, I like to do almost like a Marvel cinematic. I like to get the origin stories behind people. I love to see how the sausage was made behind the curtain and kind of getting that feel to really how you became you and doing the things you are doing now. So before comedy, before speaking, who were you, Scott?
Well, I was born a poor black child in a log cabin in South Carolina. And I was no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Steve. That's somebody else's story. I actually am a lifelong entrepreneur. I did end up in comedy. I am a podcaster. I am also now retired. Whoop, whoop. But it started out of the necessity of survival. My parents divorced when they were 10. I was working by the time I was 12 and started my first company when I was 17. And the reason I started my own company was because I got fired from every other job. And that's because I always thought I could do it better than the owner. They didn't agree with me.
Understandable. Were you always comfortable with talking, or is that something you learned along the way?
Part of it's, I think, in the genes. My father was a traveling salesman, always had a joke, could talk to anybody, and I may have actually genetically engineered me into that kind of salesman and talker. But I think also that in the world, on the road to survival, when you're trying to create something when you're young, you have to kind of overcome the usual roadblocks, like stage fright and being unable to talk to strangers, or, how to ask the right questions and then shut up and listen, because that's how you sell something, by the way. You ask questions and learn what the needs of the customer are, and then you're able to sell them something because you're able to provide a product that solves their problem, right? And so that all comes from good communication skills. But it was something that I was blessed with fairly early on. It did kind of get exaggerated in the 80s as I opened up a chain of comedy clubs. I was the house MC, and so I MC'd and produced literally thousands of stage shows, and that led to radio and television, and it was really an exciting time. But it all started with me, and this is a true story. I was 17. I was the night janitor at a rundown motel, literally buffing floors and cleaning toilets and fixing people's TVs. And I overheard, I was hiding from the boss in the bar. Now, I was 17. I wasn't even supposed to be in the bar. But I overheard two guys talking about making money as a side hustle, painting lines in parking lots. And the guy was kind of telling his buddy what he was doing. And I just sat there eavesdropping. And I thought, well, shit, I could do that. And I got off of my job. I did some research. I went and now here's where the difference, how I'm different. I did my research on painting lines and parking lots. I had no idea, wasn't a construction guy. I actually went to the number one striping company in my area here in Northern California, and I just asked them, hey, how'd you get started? Where do you get your paint? What do you charge? And people are proud of their companies. They're proud of what they've succeeded with. And so the guy told me everything. I wasn't a threat. I was a 17-year-old kid. So I went back and started my company, A&A Restripe. Now, you're not nearly as old as me, but any guess as to why it was A&A Restripe?
I'm trying to.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
I got nothing.
That's okay. I'll help you out. The answer is back then, the only marketing was the telephone yellow pages. And if you were A&A, you were the first listing. So people would go to striping, paint, parking lot striping in under construction or whatever, anywhere in the yellow pages, and the number one company would be A&A Restripe.
You thought of that at 17?
Well, I guess it didn't seem that amazing at the time, but it was. That's truism.
That's very clever. That's very clever. Like
now, these days, nobody knows what yellow pages are, so things have changed.
They have. Arguably so. I every once in a while, a few years back, I still every once in a while would see yellow pages. I'm like, wow, good for them. They still exist. But like,
I think they still put them out, but nobody uses it. Back then it was like a paper internet. It was the only way you could reach literally everybody in the town got free yellow pages. Now the ads cost money in the yellow pages. And as we grew as a company, we would pay for bold print or a little sales pitch, but the free listing was there, for free. You got a free listing. So it was a great way to market a new small company. I ran that for a few years, sold it, and made a little bit of money. And then I started another company, and this was before, I don't want to age myself. Well, I'm going to age myself. We were spinning records of disco music before the movie Saturday Night Fever. So we were ahead of the game, and called Sounds Good Music. This time we didn't use the A because we just thought Sounds Good was a good name, and we were rocking and rolling by then. So that was my second company. And then I went on to, I was selling life insurance, and quite miserable. When you're 21, 22 years old, you're not thinking about death, but selling life insurance, business to business, by the way, B2B sales. So you had to be able to walk into any and every business, get past the gatekeeper and talk to the owner and try to sell them life insurance. So that taught me a lot. A lot of no's, a lot of, getting chased out of buildings and that kind of thing. But that's where you kind of build up that callus to where you can deal with whatever's thrown at you and still say, well, yeah, but, I'm just here to help you. What if you die tomorrow, who's going to run the business, and then make people think and hopefully answer their questions. I only go sidebar on that because I was not happy as a young 20-something year old selling life insurance. It's not something I could relate to, but I was good at it. So I go on vacation and I'm down in LA. My father, who had a great sense of humor, said, hey, you got to go over to this little club. I think it's called the Comedy Store. And there was a little satellite location right by UCLA, and not the main store in Hollywood. This was a little small suburb club. And I went by with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife. And we had such a great time because this was before stand-up comedy was really known, right? There was a couple clubs in New York, a couple in San Francisco, a couple in LA, but it was not a mainstream entertainment type. And I had a great time. I saw Dave Coulier, Sandra Bernhardt, George Wallace. And after the show, I introduced myself to the comics and started asking them questions. And on the 6-hour drive home in my head, I developed the whole business plan. And I got home and I went bankrupt, so I had no debt. And I quit my job, so I was, it was do or die. And I went back down to LA, met some more. Dave Coulier, introduced me to Bob Saget, who introduced me to Gary Shandling, who introduced me to Jerry Seinfeld, who introduced me to Ray Romano, who introduced me to Jay Leno. I mean, once you get in that world, you get to meet everybody, and I'm asking everybody hundreds of questions. And again, it goes back to the first company. If you have to ask the right questions and then listen to the answers, right? And anyway, with their help and no money, I was able to actually get this, Steve. I made a deal. There was a big restaurant in a tourist area, and they had a banquet room that they were only using a few nights a week. So I negotiated free use of their banquet room if they got the sale of the cocktails and the food. Okay. So I got to use this space for free. The downside was every time they had a banquet, I had to tear down the banquet and set up my comedy club, and then tear down my comedy club to set up their banquet. So it was a lot of work, but I was 24 and I opened up Laughs Unlimited all comedy showroom in August of 1980. And my first opening act was Gary Shandling, who, if you guys Google him, you'll see his face and go, oh, this guy was in 100 movies and TV shows. And the headliner was George Wallace, who is known as Mr. Las Vegas. He had his own showroom in Vegas for 2 decades, and at the Flamingo, by the way. And that was the beginning of the comedy world. And I dove into it. I built it up to a chain of 3 clubs and ran it for 21 years, was on stage every night, and just had so much fun helping develop talent like Ellen DeGeneres and Bob Saget, and goes on and on. I mean, I could name drop forever, but it was really exciting, Steve.
Yeah.
So you asked for how it started. That's kind of that's a great origin
story.
That's the meat and the sausage.
Yeah, no, I really like that, and like I love the fact that you did make the statement. You ask the right questions and you can get people talking. But a little caveat to that, I feel like it's having the confidence to go up and ask those questions too really does make the difference, because every single situation that you were describing, everything that you did was, while you had the experience now and you had built up that experience, it had involved you going up and saying, hey, here I am.
Right. Right. You have to have an ego. You have to be a little arrogant. You have to be, I had the gift that even though I was arrogant and egotistical, I knew I had a lot to learn. And I was not only not afraid to ask the right questions, but made a point. Once I got the first couple months under my belt, and even right before I opened, I went to other clubs in San Francisco and LA and, asked the waitresses questions, asked the managers, who books the room, what kind of money you paying the comics, the waitresses. Well, how do you, how many drinks are you selling, and how do you serve them so you don't interrupt the show? People don't think of these things. So if you got a cocktail waitress that has to serve drinks to the very front row, so you're literally 2 feet from the comic, how do you do it without interrupting his set? And there's little tricks to it. You have to kind of go up half bent over, and then as soon as you get to the table, you're down on one knee. I mean, it's really tough on the waitresses, but they make good tips. And they whisper to the customers, which means that the customers whisper back. And so a comic could be up doing a show and the waitresses are not an interruption at all. And that's a real gift. Those waitresses are talented and special, but those are the little things that nobody in the club even would think about.
Yeah. And you went and did that. I'm absolutely mind boggled here. I love that you put that thought into it. Like you talked about the success of it. Where did you mess up? Where did you trip in all this?
Are you kidding?
I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Oh, I went bankrupt twice. I had somebody fall in the club and sue me. It never failed that on Friday night about 5:15, the ice machine would break down or the beer dispenser would quit working. It's always after 5 o'clock on a Friday, right? When you got the biggest nights coming up. And so you have to pay double or triple to get somebody out to fix something. I mean, in the middle of a weekend and running out of something, grabbing an employee, run over to the liquor store and get some wine. I mean, just, anybody listening that's owned a restaurant Here's the other challenge, Steve. I don't mean to go down a weird path,
Let's
but a
do
lot
it.
of people think, oh, wow, he opened a comedy club. Well, it wasn't like just opening a theater. When you have a comedy club, it's a restaurant because you have to serve food, even if it's just snacks. Um, you have to be a bar owner because you want to sell alcohol. That's where the money is. But you're also operating a showroom, so you have to take money at the door and decide who gets in and who doesn't. And you're a producer because you have to put together a show that people want to see and will enjoy. And again, some people think, well, that's easy. You get three funny people and you throw them up. No, no, no. You can't put somebody really dirty in front of somebody that's clean. You can't put somebody really, 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 really funny in the opening act and have a guy that's not very funny close the show, right? You have to build to a climax and take the audience on a journey of laughter, basically. And there's all these nuances to the production side, let alone, bartenders and waitresses and food orders and kitchen stuff. I mean, I took on a lot and I made a lot of mistakes, but the key, and I think people have heard this before, is it's okay to make mistakes, but don't make the same mistake twice.
It's great advice.
You got to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. When you were doing these clips, I'm curious, was there any comedian that came out to you that you thought that you took a risk on, that it paid out for having them on the show or having them on the mic?
I was really lucky, Steve. I got started in 1980 when comedy was not that hot a thing. And in the 70s and in the 60s, comedy was getting more attention, but it was mostly the break between jazz bands or at strip clubs between strippers, right? There wasn't, other than the Comedy Store in LA and the Improv in New York and a couple clubs like the Punchline in San Francisco, there was maybe, when I opened, I was literally the 12th full-time comedy club in the entire United States, the 12th in the whole US. Now that's 1980. By 1985, all the discos that were crashing became comedy clubs. So it was like Starbucks. You went from having 12 in the whole country to having 2 or 3 in every major city across the country, right? Literally hundreds of them. So I was able to ride that wave, what we call the rock and roll of comedy. But it was a lot of work. It's like a marriage. You're committed to your business. Any business owner, any entrepreneur knows that it's like a marriage. You're committed to it. You have to sacrifice for it. I wasn't taking weekends off because I was committed to my business. I mentioned the girlfriend that became a wife, became an ex-wife. That was really exciting. 18 months of marriage, 18 years of payments. But I was the bad guy because I was focused on my business. I had to make it succeed so I could support my family and have something to leave my kids later on. But that focus obviously took me away from maybe being the best husband or dad. But and I'm being generous here. She was not the kind of person you'd want to grow old with. But anyway, but the other thing, Steve, and tell me if I'm like boring anybody, but it was so big in the 80s. If anybody remembers the Reagan years, money was flowing and I was making some good cash at my comedy clubs. So I, being an entrepreneur, every year had a new, what I call adventure. And I opened up 2 other restaurants. One was a family Italian style restaurant. I had a jazz nightclub. I had a barbecue joint because, hey, I had a barbecue recipe nobody else had. I opened a couple art galleries because my mom was into art and that brought me up with an appreciation of artists. I have no talent. I can't even do a good stick figure. It's kind of like comedy. I can be on stage and entertain a crowd, but I don't write material. I don't write jokes. As an art gallery owner, I appreciate and understand art, but I can't do it, right? And it just kept growing. I mean, it was crazy. At one point, it was about 1988. I bought into a beach shack in Hawaii on the Big Island. So for 5 years, I owned my own beach in Hawaii and served people and got to go there as a young single guy and help the young ladies in their bikinis. And then in 1990, I was the co-owner of a tourist submarine in Monterey, California. So I had my own submarine for a couple of years. Not anybody can say that, and I got to drive it.
Yeah.
So just crazy stuff. But point of the story is not everything is a success, but I always wanted to have fun. So I would, as an entrepreneur should, I took risk and put myself out there, but I always did it to have a good, a good life, fun life.
I love that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you do see like there was a weird glitch there, it was on me. We've had some snow and it cut off for a second. Hopefully we get everything fixed on our side.
No. He was getting bored, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I heard.
That's exactly it. That was exactly it. So let me ask you this then. At what point did you realize the skills from comedy transfer outside of comedy? Where did it,
remember the story though, at 17 and 18, I started companies where I had companies and I was the salesman and CEO. And then comedy, I was now selling entertainment, selling drinks and selling food. So sales is really the foundation. So in 2001, I sold my clubs, made bank. They're still operating today. When I opened, it was the 12th club in the country. Now it's one of the oldest, longest running clubs. I think the third longest running in the country, and third or fourth. It's still going over 45 years later. But when I sold out in 2001, and then I said I retired, but of course I was in my like 44. I didn't really retire, just went on to my next adventure. And so I went on and did other things. I had a travel agency. I had a large insurance brokerage. I went on to other stuff. And then about 2.5 years ago, I retired, and I have all this, 6 years ago, I made the decision. I have all this content I own from my TV shows and the club dates, because I recorded a lot of shows. And a lot of the guys got famous, Ray Romano, Jay Leno, Bob Saget, Dave Coulier, Gary Shandling, Harry Anderson, Yakov Smirnoff. There's just so many. But I had all that content. And so now I'm retired and I really love the world of comedy, even though I'd been out of it almost 20 years. So by doing the podcast, I got to kind of relive my heyday. And I started my podcast, Stand Up Comedy, your host and MC, available on all platforms. I did interviews of club owners, waitresses, lots and lots of comics, and then shared some of the actual comedy sets from the 80s and 90s that I recorded. And it's been a huge success. In fact, I think I'm well over 650,000 listens or downloads. So, it's been, I don't make any money on it. I just do it because I love stand-up comedy and I love reconnecting with the comics. You were asking, was there anybody that really got developed? And there was a lot. But recently, from the TV show Big Bang Theory, Brian Posehn, who was the geologist on the show, was an early comic in the 90s that tried out. His first time ever on stage was at my club, and now he's a very successful actor. One of the early ones came out of Boston, and she was just not funny. But she had this character, this strangeness that I thought, I knew this is going to go somewhere. And she's the only act I worked multiple weeks as she kind of found her footing in comedy, and that was Paula Poundstone.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I mentioned Ellen DeGeneres, but she worked for me as a feature act. So she was still working her way up to headliner. And then, of course, she got her show and she went on to fame and fortune. What's interesting is that I was a lowly club owner making decent money in the 80s and 90s, but I helped people that ended up being, huge, successful stars. Jay Leno, has anybody heard of him? Or Jerry Seinfeld? Yeah. Jerry was working for me and he called me. He had a date and he called me and he goes, hey, I got this pilot I got to go do. So I'm going to have to cancel my week at the club. And I go, hey, man, we're just a stepping stone to your success. You go do that. Good luck. Right. And of course, that pilot was for Seinfeld, this TV show. And a year after its first year of airing, he calls me up and he goes, hey, I owe you a week. And Jerry's such a good guy. He came back and worked my club. He didn't do a whole week, but he did Thursday through Sunday for the same money as he had canceled the year before, even though now he had his own sitcom.
Oh, that's awesome. I love
Yeah,
that.
he's a good guy.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Another
Um,
one that got started at my club was Dana Carvey. You may have heard of him from Saturday Night Live, the
yeah, I
church
love Dana
lady and
Carvey
Hans
too.
and
Yeah.
Franz. Yeah, he
Oh,
used
dude,
to work my club all the time.
I love that. I'm a big Wayne's World fan personally,
Oh,
and Dana Carvey is
yeah.
is right up there.
Yeah.
Now when you had Bob, you said you worked with Bob Saget and Dave Coulier. Did you have them when before they went on to do their show together, or
Yeah, Dave
were
Coulier
like,
was literally one of the guys that helped get me into the business. And then he introduced me to Bob Saget, and Bob really put me on the map. He helped me write and produce my first TV commercials. He performed in them for free. Bob Saget was such a giver and such a great man. And he and Dave really worked the club many, many times. And then they got their shows, Full House and Fuller House, and they were doing the video show and stuff. They went on to fame and fortune, but we were such good friends. So again, they helped me get started in 1980. The TV show Full House came out, I think, in 88, 87, something like that. I don't remember the year, but it was, mid to late 80s. Well, in 1990, I was having the 10th anniversary of my club, kind of a big deal. A lot of businesses don't last 3 or 5 years, and I had made it to 10 years with my little comedy clubs. And Bob and Dave came back together and did my worked a whole week on my 10th anniversary. And this was, Full House had already been on a couple of years. In fact, funny side story, Steve, Bob Saget played Danny Tanner, the father on Full House. And, Full House is really popular with kids. It was like Mr. Clean and well,
oh
I don't know.
yeah.
Right. I don't know if you know, but Bob Saget is one of the filthiest comics ever on stage. Very funny, but, doesn't hold back. He has the record for the dirtiest joke ever. Anyway, when he came back for the 10th anniversary, we had moms calling us up and going, "Oh, I want to bring my 10-year-old daughter and her little friend in." You're like, "No, you can't bring kids. It's, it's not Danny Tanner, it's Bob Saget."
Yeah, no, so I grew up. I was born in '86. So I grew
That's
up
okay. I'll
with
talk
Full House.
slower.
Yeah, but I had heard, growing up, like Bob Saget, like it really, doing Full House, while he really loved it, it really did have an impact on his comedy career, because that wasn't his. He wasn't the good wholesome dad. He did the show, but he wasn't, like, not that he wasn't a good wholesome dad, but that wasn't his comedy style.
Right.
And
In Full House and Fuller House, he's an actor.
yes,
On stage, he's Bob Saget, the comic. And the two worlds never crossed, right? Because Bob Saget, the stand-up comic, was really original, was really, really funny. But there was always an edge. He could do some jokes on flatulence and poop and sex that would have the whole audience ripping and laughing, that he couldn't, of course, do on Full House. And something a lot of people, your audience, may not know, Bob Saget started off as a comic musician. He always came on stage with a guitar, and he would sing popular songs but make them really dirty. Like you would hear dirty limericks, right? Well, he would sing some of the hits from the early 80s, but he would make them a little edgier.
I
And
like
a
that.
lot of people didn't know that's, he got started as a
No.
comic musician.
So, just your opinion here, and respectfully, uh, why do you think it was so difficult for society to separate Bob Saget from as the actor from Bob Saget the comedian, when you had comedians and actors like Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy, who were just as bad, if not, worse in some ways, and were still able to do good, wholesome family stuff?
Well, because even though Robin did Aladdin and a few Disney things, he never went on stage and did it clean. And either did a lot of other the comics that you mentioned. Bob Saget because Full House, like Robin, even though he did the one TV show, Orc, um, it was, I think Full House was just so pure and clean, so family,
Mm.
that his stage act was, 180 degrees different. And I think that he kind of had to make sure they stayed separate or it could have killed his TV career, right? But he really enjoyed getting up in front of an audience and talking about poop. I mean, it was just so crazy. But the thing that was funny about Saget was, there's acts that go up, oh, I went to the frickin' store and got some frickin' bread for my frickin' bitch wife, and whatever. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep it clean.
You're
But
fine.
but that's not funny. And he
Yeah.
didn't do that. He didn't drop F bombs for no reason. He would certainly drop them here and there, but there was always a comedic reason. And it wasn't that he was just being dirty to be dirty. He was talking about life in a very real way, in a way that everybody in the room could relate, but on topics that people generally, nice people, don't talk about at work or in public, right? Like
Yeah.
flatulence or poop or sex or whatever, right? But I think that's what made him so funny as a comic, is that he broke down that third wall and engaged with the audience on topics that they all had experienced, but nobody talked about. Now, why that didn't work for Robin, one, his show wasn't quite as family. Mork and Mindy wasn't quite like Full House. I
Yeah.
mean, it was and it wasn't. Mork and Mindy was more of an adult sitcom, and I think
Yeah.
Full House was really aimed at families and kids. That's the only distinction I can come up with. And then
Okay.
the other acts you mentioned never did anything that would classify them as a clean, super clean dad vision actor like Saget did.
Yeah, no, I agree. But getting away from Full House and Bob Saget and all them, and going back to you because this is your episode, sir. This is the origins of you and
Well,
talking
it's
about
your
you.
show, Steve. So anything you'd like to discuss?
Oh, don't feed my ego over here. Uh, let's talk about Verbal Ninja. By the way, cool name. By the way, love that
Oh,
off the bat. Where did that come from?
so Verbal Ninja Productions, I was already podcasting, doing my comedy podcast, but I wanted to expand, and I did a children's podcast and I did another comedy podcast. And then I was asked to produce a business podcast for a company out of Reno, Nevada. And at the same time, I was being asked to speak at various functions. And I just I needed to form a company to keep the finances away from my personal stuff. And Verbal Ninja was just something that I came up with. I mean, there was no great secret sauce to that. It just sounded cool to me, I think. And it was a company that exists with a business license, with insurance and all that, to encompass all these various entertainment things. I produce charity shows using comics and magicians and ventriloquists. I have the podcast. I was doing some public speaking. And in all those areas, you could be exposed to a lawsuit or something. And then you have the tax impacts of the income and the expenses. So forming a company is what I recommend anybody that has a side hustle. Don't just do it on the side. Your liability and your risk to your family is there. So if you form a separate entity like a company like Verbal Ninja, then you are protecting your personal assets. It's very legalese. I'm all about entertainment. I'm all about having fun, but I'm also a businessman. And I would not want to risk my family or my personal assets while I'm off goofing off and doing some stupid thing. And you never know, somebody gets insulted in this day and age. Everybody's so litigious that you need that protection. Knock on wood, I actually haven't been sued, but it's just nice knowing I have that protection. And it's very affordable when you're doing small things like I do.
Nice. Um, Curious question for you though. Kind of going into a little bit with comedy and just the communication itself. Um, is when it comes to communication, is bad communication a skill problem, or would you consider that a self-awareness problem?
I think it is partially self-awareness. I think one of the things that, and thank you, Steve. Good question. One of the things that you learn in show business that is true in all of life, whether it's personal, whether it's business or show business, and the term is read the room. In other words, you and I know that if we're out at a football game with our buddies, we can tell, the dirtiest dick joke and everyone's, going to get in and have a good time with it. But if you're at work and you're talking to your coworkers or your boss, you would never, if you're reading the room, say that kind of joke or talk about that kind of material, right? Or if
Yeah.
you're at home with your family, that's a different conversation than you would have with your people at work, which was different than you have with your fishing buddies or whatever, right? So what I'm getting to is read the room, know who your audience is. So going back to the sales stuff, when I was young and as I got older, all the sales, when I would go in and talk to a gatekeeper or a business owner, I'm reading the room. What is it they want to talk about? What they need? When I was an insurance broker, it was very similar to selling construction or selling sounds good music. We did disco parties and weddings and stuff like that. Whatever you're selling, you want to find out what the needs of your potential client are so that you can respond to those with something that'll make their life easier. And that only happens if you ask the right questions, listen to the answers, and read the room. Find out, the guy that owns a restaurant is going to have a whole different perspective on liability and insurance than a guy that does construction or than a guy that has a art gallery, right? They all have different needs. So you don't ask the same question. You have to be prepared, and maybe do a little research if necessary, but read the room and know who you're talking to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, know your demographic.
All of a sudden, I sound very boring, but it's all
no,
good.
no, no,
true
no,
information.
no. It's really good information. I mean, a lot of nerd culture is entrepreneurial business. It is a very much an entrepreneurial world. And knowing your audience and knowing your demographic and knowing what you're selling and what you're pitching to people is very vital. And
You said a good thing. You got to know your product too. I mean, if you go in and you could have the best sales pitch in the world, but if you don't understand what you're selling, your product, that's why the knowledge goes both ways. You want to learn about them, but you got to know your shit too, right? So
100%.
You made a good point there. It's not one way, it's both ways. If, for example, if they say, you finally get past the gatekeeper, you get to the owner and he goes, hey, now you're there to talk about his business. But then he goes, hey, I bought a houseboat recently and I have it up on this lake. What do I need liability wise and insurance wise? Well, it has nothing to do with his business, but if I know my stuff, I can still answer his question.
I like that. One of the things I was taught, and this comes from my Navy days, was
wait, you were in the Navy?
I was, did 10
What'd
years.
What'd you do? 10 years?
Yeah,
Woo, let's hear it. Yeah. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That's
Appreciate
incredible.
It.
Were you the guy mopping the floors or did you drive the ship?
I did mop floors. No, we swept rain off the ship. So it was fun. It was horrible. No, I was that guy. You ever see the Navy commercials? Man, you remember back in like early 2000s where they had what was his name who did it? If somebody wrote a book about your life, would anybody want to read it? And so and they show the ship and they do those there's absolutely like energetic pans and they just show off everything and they show the sailors in the dark room with all these really high-tech video screens and everything. Yeah, I was a guy in that room. It wasn't that high tech and it wasn't that cool. It was freezing cold. It was boring. We were working like 12-hour days.
So
I was
in communication.
Operations specialist. I was in charge of
Oh,
strategic maneuvering of ships and tactical assets.
Steve,
Uh,
I'm so impressed. Thank you
I
so
know,
much for your
right?
service.
Oh,
No,
thank
that's
you.
really cool. And I got to say this to explain to your audience. I'm a lot older than you, but I come from the Vietnam War generation, and a few of my friends went, and a
Very
few of my
understandable.
friends didn't make it home. And I personally was in the draft for 2 years. But back in those days, you did not want to go to war. Vietnam was not one of those video game wars where you can easily see the bad guy, and like World War II, it's kind of like everybody could see everybody. Vietnam was a hellhole with the jungles and the mosquitoes and the snakes and all that stuff. And I did not want to go. I would have gone if I got drafted. Luckily, I had a high number. I didn't get drafted, but I have much, much respect for the people that serve our country. So thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you. And
that's interesting and exciting, and hopefully you shared that story with your listeners.
oh, all the time. Yeah, no, they know that. Where was I going with this?
Sorry,
It's okay. You threw me off there.
went off about you, but it's your show. It's okay to learn.
No. Where was I going with this? I can't even remember. Whatever. Well, God, that totally threw me off.
I'm so sorry. Well,
Oh,
it's
you're
my
good. You're
fault. I
good.
took you. I
No,
took you
no,
down a road,
no.
but I think it's what's interesting is that people think that I don't know what people think. I think the military, for example, my brother went in. I put him in because he needed structure. He needed to kind of have his life somewhat controlled. He needed to be
Oh, yeah.
told what to do. It helped him stay off of drugs for a while and stuff like that. And the military teaches so much, so many great skills that will benefit you as you go forward in your life. I have a lot of really good interpersonal communication skills, but I had to learn those through the road of hard knocks, through trial and error, and I developed slowly over time. And I am always impressed and excited to talk to people that have served in the military because even though there's a lot of yes sir, you're learning stuff all the time and not just getting communication, but then when you get a little higher in rank, you have to be able to communicate to the
Oh,
people below.
100%. Yeah.
And those communication skills are so vital and will help you as you go forward. In fact, after all those years in the Navy, you might even want to have a podcast.
You just might. You just might. It has nothing to do with just obnoxious family members. No, actually, I do remember what I was going to say though.
I
One
was
of the
buying
things we
time.
learned.
What are the things you learn?
Yes. Let me tell you. So it was so much to get the information you want to get and to actually communicate with somebody. It's not so much asking them the question. So asking certain questions because you and I are on a show right now. You expect
What?
to. I know, right? You expect to have a question, a query, and then to recall information because you feel comfortable talking to. But when you're trying to establish those connections with people and in real time world and like in any kind of business, it's easier to set that communication connection by making a statement instead of a question. So I could come up to you and I'd be like, I heard this fact not too long ago that most comedy clubs don't make it past like 3 years. That's so crazy. And you're more likely to respond to that and go like, yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. Like, mine, going in and talking about your clubs, and you're more willing to share information and build that bond. And that's an
Because you
asset
brought,
that you
yeah,
can use.
because you phrased the question in a sense that touches my personality or my history. So in other words, you didn't just come up and say, "Hey, what was it like owning a business?" It was like, "Hey, I heard this about the comedy industry." So you're focusing the question, the communication on a personal level that demands a personal and hopefully informational response. So what I want to recommend to you and your friends is this company I work with out of Reno, Nevada. He has a podcast called How to Talk to Humans. It stars Larry Wilson, who's a lifelong entertainer, but he's learned so many great communication skills that he's put it together into a company called the Wilson Method, that anybody really interested in solid communication skills and that's active listening. You know, all the things that are important, whether it's business or personal life, that's somewhere to go check out. But hey, Steve, we're running low on time. I want to plug my stuff. Can I do that?
Absolutely. Tell the people
You
out in
sure?
Nerd Nation where they can find
You
you.
sure?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
100%.
ladies and gentlemen, I'm a retired producer, and I have a podcast called Stand Up Comedy. Your host and MC. That's my stand-up comedy podcast. It's been going 6 years, very successful. I've written a couple books. The latest one's called 20 Questions Answered about being a stand-up comic, and I have a copy somewhere here. But that's available on Amazon. But the exciting new thing, Steve, are you ready? The exciting new thing.
I'm listening.
I have a brand new video podcast, all about entertainment, comedy, and magic and ventriloquism. And I have a co-host each and every show. So it's really fun and exciting. And it's called the Tag Team Talent Podcast. Once again, Tag Team Talent Podcast. If you like comedy entertainment, go check it out. And you won't be alone because it's just about to hit 1 million views. And I started in March. It is rocking.
Woo! Yes!
Yes.
All right, guys, we are having major internet issues, storm issues. It has been, Scott, you have been so great to have on the show. It has been such a pain, but, let's go ahead and let's wrap this up on our side. As always, please like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you're listening to our podcast. If you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please remember to rate and review. Love them, we crave them, we need them. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, so please remember to like and follow us at DNA Pod or on our webpage, www.nerddnapod.com. I'm your host, Steve Pugh. I have been joined by the amazing, the impeccable, the entertaining, and the ever so patient Scott Edwards. Sir, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on Dads with Nerdy Ambitions. This has been Scott Edwards. Time out.
Thank you so much for being on the show, sir.
Hey, I hope you can get something out of that. It was a lot of fun. I hope I didn't, droll on stuff too much. We name dropped a bit. We got some good information out.
Yeah.
And you need to go clean some snow off the porch.
I do. Thank you and good night.
I've got Warhammer lore that'll put you to sleep.
Dads with nerdy ambition. Dice, like we're men on a mission. When the kids asleep, the nerds will play.